Hello, everyone. Today, I want to share a personal story with you, one that happened to me. I am 69 years old, and like many others, I spent most of my life working hard for my children. I always thought that old age would be a time to rest and enjoy the fruits of my labor, but life had different plans for me. My name is Kim. I spent over 30 years working as a social worker, specializing in elderly care. I met thousands of elderly men and women, and I heard countless stories. Some were happy, but most were sad. I always advised the elderly to retain their independence, to not hand over all their money to their children, and to avoid becoming overly dependent on them. However, when I reached my own senior years, I realized I couldn't follow my own advice. 9 years after retiring, I developed severe joint degeneration, and I had to undergo surgery to replace both of my knee joints. While the surgery was successful, I lost the ability to walk. I entered a long recovery phase where I couldn't take care of myself. That's when I began to rely on my children, something I had always feared would happen. My oldest son, Min, invited me to live with his family. At first, everything seemed warm. My daughter-in-law was kind, and my grandchildren greeted me excitedly. I thought to myself, thank goodness I still have family to depend on. But just a few weeks later, the atmosphere in the house began to shift. I slowly became the one who did the housework, watched the grandchildren, and prepared dinner. The family became busier, and conversations with me became rare. The house grew quiet, but this silence was not peaceful. It was the loneliness of being forgotten. One evening, I went to the kitchen to get some water and overheard my daughter-in-law on the phone with her mother. Her voice was low, but I could hear every word clearly. "Mom, I feel suffocated. Ever since she moved in, things aren't the same. My friends don't come over anymore, and my husband has started using work as an excuse to stay out longer. I'm even looking into a nursing home that costs around $3,800 a month." I was stunned. Here I was, a woman who had spent her entire life caring for the elderly, now finding myself in their shoes. It didn't matter how much I had sacrificed or how well I had raised my children. At some point, I could become a burden in my own home. I remembered the many elderly people who had held my hand over the years and said, "Kim, don't end up like me. I gave everything to my kids, and now I'm in a nursing home. They visited at first, but now they don't come anymore. Don't be like me." Back then, I only listened. But now, those stories were becoming my own. I finally understood what they meant. It became clear to me that when parents reach a certain age, they may no longer have a place in their own home. If they haven't prepared for it, old age can turn into a time of loneliness and helplessness, not peace and rest. After that phone call, I no longer felt comfortable in my son's house. I began noticing the way people looked at me, the short, clipped conversations, and the long silences. Min, my son, was still kind, but I could sense his exhaustion. Daughter-in-law couldn't hide her irritation. She didn't say anything, but her every step, every glance seemed to say, "Mom, it's time for you to leave." I lived like that for nearly a month until one morning Min said to me, "Mom, your health isn't quite there yet. How about you stay with my sister for a while? It's quieter there, and I think you'll feel more comfortable." I agreed without saying a word. I knew Min didn't want to say it out loud, but in his heart, he was probably relieved. The next day, Min drove me to my daughter's house where she and her husband, Trake, lived in a small apartment. Janang, my daughter, greeted me warmly. "Mom, you've come. I've prepared a small room for you." It wasn't big, but it was clean and quiet. I was grateful, though I knew this would be a temporary solution. At least my daughter still cared. For me. But just a few weeks later, things started to change again. Trak, my son-in-law, who had been polite and friendly at first, began to speak less and avoid looking at me when he came home. One day, I overheard my daughter and her husband arguing. "How long are we going to keep Mom here? She's still recovering. I understand, but I don't feel comfortable with her here. Isn't Min supposed to help?" I lay there in bed, pretending to be asleep, my heart breaking. I didn't cry, but I couldn't stop the tears from flowing. The next day, Jiang acted as if nothing had happened, but I knew she was anxious. She was probably afraid I had heard their conversation. A few days later, she said, "Mom, Min called me yesterday. He's looking into a good nursing home with medical care. If you're okay with it, we can go visit it together." I looked her in the eye and replied, "Jiang, I've worked in social work for over 30 years. I know exactly what those places are like. I don't need to visit, I don't want to go." She lowered her head, not saying anything more. But from that moment on, I understood something important. When your children start discussing nursing homes, it means that in their hearts you are no longer an active part of the family, but just a temporary guest. That evening, I began packing my things. Jiang rushed in saying, "Mom, what are you doing? Don't go back to the old apartment, you're still recovering, let us help you." But I was determined. I'm not a burden, and I don't want to live off you. I'll manage on my own. Despite her attempts to convince me, I left. I caught a taxi early the next morning to my old apartment, the place where I had lived for so many years before moving in with my son. The place was cold and dusty, but at least it was mine. It was my space, free from judgment and awkward silences. It wasn't easy. I had just had major knee surgery, and I was still in pain. Every simple task, like cooking or going to the bathroom, was a challenge. That night, the pain in my knees worsened and I struggled to move. I eventually crawled back to my bed crying quietly. The next morning, I decided to call a home care service. The person on the other end of the line asked, "Do you need full-time or part-time care?" I hesitated. The full-time service was too expensive. My pension barely covered the basics, and the thought of hiring someone full-time was impossible. Chose part-time care, hoping to manage until I could recover enough to take care of myself again. The next day, a caregiver named Mai arrived. She was in her 50s with a gentle voice. She helped me with meals, personal hygiene, and cleaning. I was grateful but also embarrassed. This was the first time in my life that I needed someone to take care of me. It wasn't easy. Every week, the company sent a new caregiver and I had to explain everything again. I began to feel like my life was no longer my own. A month passed. My health improved slightly, but my spirits sank. My savings were running low and my pension was barely enough to cover the care costs. One day I looked at my savings account and realized I had to dip into my emergency fund, the money I had set aside for a true crisis. I thought about calling Min or Jiang, but I quickly dismissed the idea. I didn't want to hear more suggestions about nursing homes. That night I lay awake thinking about my situation. I had spent my life helping others plan for their old age, but now I was struggling to figure out my own future. After many sleepless nights, I decided that I couldn't keep living like this. I didn't want to go to a nursing home, and I couldn't afford full-time care. But there had to be another way. I grabbed my old social work notebook, which I had used for years. It was filled with contact information for senior programs. As I flipped through the pages, I noticed a section I had never paid much attention to: affordable senior housing with government support. It wasn't a nursing home, but it was a place where elderly people could live independently with support available when needed. The next day I went to the social services center. A former colleague, Hoa, recognized me. "Kim, long time no see. How have you been?" I smiled and replied, "I'm not doing well. I'm looking for information about senior housing." Hoa led me to a flyer about affordable housing for seniors over 60. The costs were low, and it included emergency call systems, regular checkups, and visits from social workers. The apartment would be small, but it was private, with everything designed for the elderly's needs. I was thrilled. This could be the solution. The next day, I filled out the application. For the first time in months, I felt in control of my life. I wasn't relying on anyone. I was making my own decisions. After submitting my application, I returned home feeling lighter. That evening, I called Min. "I've applied for a new place to live, not a nursing home, but independent housing with support from the government." It's affordable, and I think it will work well for me. There was a long pause on the phone before Min replied, "Are you sure about this? Is it safe? You'll be all alone there." I smiled to myself, feeling a sense of peace. There's a staff member who visits regularly, and I have an emergency button. I can manage on my pension. Min hesitated, then asked, "So where will you get the deposit money from?" At that moment, I realized that his concern wasn't about my safety, but about the money. "I'll use the deposit from my old apartment. The rest I'll keep in the bank for emergencies." Min was quiet for a moment before asking, "Mom, I need to borrow some money for Min Chi's college tuition. Can you help?" I gripped the phone tightly, not out of anger, but out of sadness. The first thing my son asked after hearing about my move wasn't about my health or well-being. It was about money. I responded slowly but firmly. "I've spent my whole life taking care of you. Now I need to take care of myself. I'm not rich and I don't want to be a burden. I can't lend you money right now." I could feel him pulling away, but I had drawn the line. For the first time in my life as a mother, I said no. That night, my daughter Jiang called me. I thought she would congratulate me, but instead she was silent.